Welcome to Scherzo TV. I'm your host, the friendly neighborhood music-loving frog. Now, there's a bit of an exciting news. So you might have heard that Chopin recently dropped a new single. Now, obviously, it's not every day that this thing happens. In fact, it's been quite a while. Last time it happened was, if I'm not mistaken, in the 1950s when they discovered Chopin's other A minor waltz, which is very famous. I'm sure you've heard it before. It goes something like this. Etc., etc. Now, obviously, these two pieces are quite different. For starters, the last waltz, we know a bit more about its potential origins. So we can make an educated guess, essentially, that it might have been written for a member of the Rothschild family. In addition to that, we have access to both its working copy and its fair copy, which both reside in the French National Library. And, of course, it is very much decidedly a complete piece. Now, before anybody jumps up to say anything about the, completion, I'm going to have to say, okay, I know that some people believe that this new waltz is complete. I have to say that I can't agree with this. And obviously, I'll explain my logic a little bit later. So, just hold your horses for the moment. Now, coming back to this new waltz, we don't really know a lot about its origin backstory. And here I have printed out for everybody the autograph of this piece. Now, I got the dimensions for this thing from the Morgan Library, which it currently resides in right now. They said that it's a 13 by 10 centimeter piece of paper, more or less. So I have here tried to print it out to its real life size, so maybe everybody can get an idea of what it looks like, more or less. Obviously, this is a super, super, super tiny piece of paper. I think this is the first time that I've seen his autograph on such a small piece of paper, actually. And this, in combination with the fact that he wrote down some fingering for some of the notes, points to the possibility, maybe, that this was intended to be a gift for somebody. Now, in addition to this point, there are a couple of other peculiarities about the score. So, first of all, the staves on the paper appear to be printed and not hand-drawn. And I think this is the first time as well that I've seen this case in his autographs. I don't think I've seen this, like the printed stave thing, elsewhere. Obviously, I could be wrong. Somebody please correct me in the comments if I am. And besides that, there's also something else that's really hard to miss, which is the big fat Chopin that lands smack dab right in the middle of the page, middle of the top of the page, actually. And to be honest, I don't think that Chopin had this kind of habit. So I don't believe that this was written by the man himself. Now, obviously, despite all of that, if we look at the notation, so like the way that Chopin was writing the notes themselves, I believe that, at least to my untrained eyes, that the notation looks pretty much in line with the notation that appears in his other autographs. And in addition to that, there's kind of the interesting way that he writes his bass clefs. So he does this in this kind of S-shaped curve, which appears here and also in his other autographs. Now, I think the most important thing, though, is that this piece sounds pretty much just distinctively like it's his sound. So I'll play this piece. I'll play what's written on the score for you guys to take a listen to. notice something a little bit funny about this, which is the last kind of A that's hanging around there at the very end, a little bit lonely. And something that's important to note is that this A is exactly the same A that appears right at the beginning of the piece. So that means that, you know, it's not entirely impossible. Like, it could be possible that maybe he wanted us to loop back from the ending right back to the beginning. But I'm going to have to say, I don't think this really musically makes sense, unless his intention was to make some sort of, you know, music box style piece that could be essentially rotated and looped infinitely. Now, here's why. If we look at the structure and the proportions of the piece, first of all, we see that it has 8 bars of introduction, and then only a paltry 16 bars for the rest of the piece, if you consider this to be just, you know, one complete piece. That means that your introduction is a whopping 1/3 of your whole piece. Proportion-wise, I just don't think that makes sense. In addition to that, if he had really wanted a repeat, why didn't he write one? Now, I know he has this kind of double bar line thing going on at the end, right before that A, but to be honest, repeats, it's just like, it's 4 dots. It's easy to dot them out. I don't think there's any real reason that he might have, like, chose to not do the dots on the repeats 4. So yeah, given that, you know, first of all, the proportion is just kind of wacky, and then also that he didn't write a repeat, essentially. Those 2 facts combined together lead me to believe that this piece, just in this form, is not a complete piece, but rather maybe some sort of musical idea that really invites a completion. And, drum roll, that is what I'm going to be attempting to do today. Now, obviously, disclaimer first, I'm no Chopin, and it's really, really super difficult to write in somebody else's musical style and language. But, you know, I thought it might be interesting, really, to kind of give it a go and see what we can do with it, really. So rather than saying that this is some sort of serious musical attempt to put this to some sort of end, this is more like, you know, just having fun. Yeah, all right. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Obviously, before we continue with the baking, you gotta know what are the ingredients in the bowl, at least. So let's take a look at what he has written, and, you know, maybe not so much hidden as what's placed in the piece so far. If we look even right from the beginning, we can notice that he has this kind of 3-note descending chromatic figure. So that comes back essentially twice. And this also occurs in the middle of the real kind of main body section. So that's one point. Oh yeah, I can't miss this last one either. Now, of course, moving on, we also see that he has kind of this ascending minor second, which is this. And this also comes back here, which is from this. And so essentially those are 2 kind of main elements we're working with, as well as his kind of really salient A pedal. Now, what I mean by A pedal is essentially that he's kind of holding, there's an A that goes on in the bass for a long time, and we can see that the A pedal continues throughout the introduction and throughout like half of the main body. So before that finally breaks off there. So putting all of that together, this is kind of the basics of what we have to work with. And I'll try my best to interweave some of the elements that we see here on the page into the rest of the structure of the piece. So we have some sort of structural integrity, hopefully. Of course, speaking about structure, what do we want to do for the rest of this piece? Like, what do we want to have for a continuation? Personally, I feel like a rondo form is kind of a good way to go. So essentially, rondo form means you have like a main idea, and then you have, after that main idea, a second idea, which is different from your main idea. Maybe a little bit similar, but obviously still different in character or nature or whatever. Then we come back to our main idea, the first idea. And then we go off into another venture, into another even more different idea, before finally coming back for our last time into the main idea. Now, obviously, this is kind of a simple version of a rondo structure. There are longer and more complicated variants, but I think this is, a kind of a good place to get started. So yeah, given that we kind of already have our roadmap in our hands now, we can maybe try working out some of the details of the following sections then. So we'll think about our first different section now, coming right after the end. Now, what do we want to have here? If we're going to take that last note, the kind of last hanging A that I mentioned before, and this is going to be the first note in the new section, essentially. There are two ways, at least two obvious ways to me, that this could go. Either this A serves as kind of the dominant to D minor, or kind of this A goes down and becomes the dominant to C major, so like this. And both are, I would say, equally valid ways of going about things. Personally, there's just been a lot of minor in this piece so far, and so I feel like it might be attractive to do maybe a little bit of a foray into C major, essentially. So that's what we're going to attempt now. Before I continue on, quick note that I forgot to mention is that I'll be trying to do more or less 16 bars per section, kind of following the example of the first main section. And this 16 bar is going to be kind of comprised of two 8-bar chunks. And yeah, basically that's just a quick note there about what I'm going to do. So I think more or less that sounded good. Obviously, I'm improvising, so it's going to be different every time. I'm going to do my best to zero in and to not forget what I've been doing. But I think that sounded pretty decent. Harmonically, I think I've got the things that I want going. So yeah. Okay, we can move back into our repetition of the main section now. So here, basically, we're doing the same thing as what's been written in the score. One important thing, though, is we don't want to be doing exactly the same thing. So I'm going to try and put a little bit of maybe like some counter melodies sprinkled in here and there. Nothing too complicated. We want to leave the more complicated things for later, so we don't run out of things to do, essentially. Yeah. Okay, so I think more or less I've got an idea of what I want to do there as well. And so we can move on to the next section, which is the kind of the large, adventure. So now again we have two choices, major or minor. To be honest, I still don't feel like doing a minor key here. So a major key it is. Now, the keys with the closest relationship to A, we've already done C major, so we're not going to do that again. The other one left is A major, of course. So, and I think that's a good idea. I don't think we need to go necessarily venturing any further than that, although certainly other keys, I suppose, would be possible. I think A major works. Okay, now obviously since we've kind of done a relatively active kind of second foray, well, first foray, sorry, we're not going to be doing something super active here because we want to create a larger sense of contrast. So maybe something that jumps around a little bit less. Maybe we could even consider doing double notes somewhere. We'll see. Okay. Okay, not good. Let's see what else we can do. So I think the introduction of an F-sharp minor chord somewhere in there is a good idea. I'm going to have to find a better main melody than that, though. So yeah, incorporation of the A pedal would be an interesting thing to do. I think this register sounds good, but again, I'm going to have to tinker a bit with the melody. I think that's a good section. And now all we have left is the ending, so the last return of the section, main section. Now, a couple of things we can do here. First of all, we have to consider how we want to end this. I don't think I want to end just in the same way as the section usually closes, because I feel like it doesn't have enough of a sense of finality. I guess it could work, but I think it'd be better to try and maybe add a little bit of something extra. So before we consider kind of the details of how we're gonna spice up the rest of the section, let's take a look at what we want maybe for the closing. So there's some interesting material in the introduction that could be used. Obviously, we can't just rehash the whole thing. So we can consider maybe taking part of this. I think in particular the figuration having the, obviously not on those notes because we need to close in a solid A minor chord. So let's see. So I guess either a full-bodied chord could work or just those two notes in kind of in the same spirit as what we had in the introduction. I guess if we wanted something more full-bodied, it might be better to add more notes. So something more similar to that. So I think a deceptive cadence could work if we want to come back a second time for a larger rehashing. Seems like a good idea to go with. So I'll do my best to keep that in mind and not forget about all of that. Okay, we can start looking at the rest of the section. So actually that was pretty good, but I'm gonna have to see if I can actually remember that. And also the virtuosic part is kind of surprisingly harder to nail down than I thought it would be. So I'm gonna maybe give it a couple more goes and see if I can hammer something in. I think that's more or less good. Should be. Okay, so let's see what the finished product looks like. Okay, so I think more or less that's that. Obviously, as an improvisation, a couple of technical things it's a little bit harder to get settled in, but more or less I think that's kind of an idea. So I think for like for fun project, feels good more or less. And I think that's an interesting way to go. And honestly, I think if you're interested, you can try doing your own kind of versions upon this thing as well. If you also believe that it can be kind of, it's an idea in need of completion. But that was definitely a fun thing to try. Yeah. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed the video. And please like and subscribe if you want a little bit more. Always new videos upcoming. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.